So I'm going to go over here, and I just logged into my dashboard in the back end, and I'm going to go over to where it says Customize under Appearance, and I'm going to find where it says Background Image. All right, and under Preset where it says Default, this is a really simple way of doing it. I'm just going to say Fill Screen. If you do Fit to Screen, then it's going to use the contain value for background size, and it only will fit it in terms of the width. So that's not what you want. You want to use fill screen, and that basically uses the background size of cover. And then the other thing that happens is that it won't scroll. And so now you're not faced with the problem of having that repeating image that goes all the way down. So do save and publish. That's the easiest way of dealing with it. And the reason that you need to do it that way is because if you come over here, let's do a refresh now, and you'll see the way that the page is now. And the reason is because if I were to inspect this and I were to go all the way up to the body, which is where that picture is being loaded, you'll notice that it's being loaded not through normal CSS, or not through an external style sheet. You'll see that it's actually being loaded on the index page on line 46. If I were to jump to that, it shows me over here where it's being loaded, and you'll see that it's being pulled in as custom CSS, meaning that it's embedding that style up in the head of the HTML. And so that means it's going to override any kind of external style sheet change that we make. So you really do need to actually go and make that change in the appearance customizer panel for the background image. Otherwise, it's just going to get overridden. All right, so now that looks better. It's already starting to come together a whole lot better. And one of the things that you might notice is that this padding now looks a little bit bigger. And the reason is because I've logged in, and the difference is this amount for the WordPress overlay, the tool overlay. And so like if you wanted to just double check, you could copy this URL and go into a totally different browser. Like if you're in Chrome, you could go to Firefox or Safari or you know, Edge or something like that, and just go ahead and load the page, and you'll see that as long as you're not logged in with that extra overlay, your spacing up here is a lot more predictable. All right, and so I think that that is actually something that I'm pretty happy with. One of the other things that I also did notice, like if you wanted to just maybe double check in a different browser and make sure that so far everything is looking the way you would expect it to look so far. One thing that you might notice, actually, let's see what happens at the bottom of this to see. All right, one thing that you might notice is that there's no margin down below the main content area right here, and so it just jumps right into the secondary area. That's something that we didn't test for before, so you could also make an adjustment for that. To put some margin at the bottom of this particular item. Now, the other thing too that I was going to point out is if you go over and you make this into a responsive view and you click on the menu button, one thing that you'll notice is that if this is up here, I don't have access to everything, right? That's not good, since that's my only way of getting to my menu items. And so if that's the case, you might want to make some adjustments also to your style sheet there. Let's go ahead, and I'm going to come back over here, and let's do a test. And let's make sure that the behavior is the same in both of these browsers. And as I said before, this additional toolbar is what's taking up all this extra room right here. So don't freak out and think that you've got to go back to your JavaScript page and change that if you were happy with where it was. But let's say that I scroll down to the bottom and I'm looking for the bottom of this content area so that I can find where we finally get to right here. The archives list is the beginning of the sidebar. So if I want to right click and then do an inspection, here I'm going to pull this out some, and oops, let's go and pull this out too. That's the end of the primary area. So where the secondary area starts, if I click on the div that's right up above the ending tag for that div right above the secondary, then that's going to highlight the content area, right? And so right here we've got margin 0 all the way around. One of the things you could do is put a bottom margin. So bottom is going to be the third position, so let's do for rem, and let's see what happens whenever we scroll down and see if it did in fact add a margin. Right, and it did. So that's something that you could also go change. It's on line 7, it looks like, of the sidebar, the content sidebar. So if we come over here and look at line 7 right here. So let's say that we're going to do that at 4 rem, all right, to keep this other thing consistent. Or we could also do, let's say, 3 rem if you wanted to keep it a smaller distance. We could save that, upload that, and let's go over here and do a refresh. And I think that that's a reasonable amount of space right there. Okay. And the other issue that we were going to take a look at is what happens with this menu. Okay, so if we're looking at this menu right here, actually let's get to the inspection so that it jumps straight to it. Here's the nav and whose class is toggled. And if we target something that is specific to it being toggled, then what we can do is make sure that we never make an adjustment to something whenever it's not toggled, for instance, like on a larger screen or something. And I don't want to make the effect on the entire nav because I don't want this menu button right here to also end up with a scroll bar. So what I'm looking actually is for I'm looking for this where it says nav menu. I want to find nav menu whenever it's a descendant in the toggled state. And actually, if I select that, you see right here that it's already pulling up the nav menu that exists only during the toggled state. So this might be the one that I want to start to adjust. One of the things that I want to do is I want to, well, actually 2 things. I need to set the height specifically because right now it's part of a fixed element, meaning that the header is fixed, and so it's not going to scroll. Fixed things just don't scroll unless you tell them to scroll. And in order for them to scroll, then you have to make sure that the height is set so that it's going to work the way that it needs to work. So for right now, I'm just going to set a basic height. Let's just say that we're going to make the height something like, I don't know, 50 VH for viewport height. Let's just say that right now. Okay, and oh, actually, I think we made a mistake here, or I made a mistake here. So where it says menu toggle, I don't actually want to add it to the toggle itself here, so we can't use this actually. Let's take part of this, all right? Let's take this where we're saying main navigation toggled, and then nav menu. I'm going to copy that, just copy this piece or this portion. I'm going to hit plus, and I'm going to instead put that in there. And here we're going to say height, okay? And then let's just try something like 50 VH. All right, and then that works. And then you see that the other stuff isn't showing, and I can say overflow. And then right now we're going to say auto. And what that does is it will automatically apply a scroll bar when it's necessary. All right, and so now we can actually scroll if, for instance, it's too short. But now the problem is it's 50 VH. What if we were to do 100 VH? Let's try that. Okay. Oop, that's 1,000. All right, so if we did 100 VH, well, the problem is that if I do this now, I'm not getting a menu scroll bar. And the reason is because remember, it's a fixed element. Just because it's off the page visibly, it's not visible to us. It doesn't mean that it's not actually already taking up a certain amount of space. I'm telling it to be 100 VH, which is definitely big enough. What I want to do is try to do like a 100 VH calculation that also subtracts the height of this this section up here. All right, and so if I wanted to really quickly, if I want to jump over here, let's do an inspection right here. We can get a general idea of how big this header is. All right, let's just get an idea of how big the header is. Oh, and we have to do this so that it's not toggled. And if we're clicking on the header and I hover it, you see it shows me right about here. I'm circling right here. when I'm hovering this, it shows me the height. It's about 150 pixels roughly, 149.84. So what that means is that if I were to go down and let's just toggle this, and we're going to go back down and we're going to find where it says nav menu, and then I've got my inspector style sheet right here for the nav menu that's under the toggled class. Then what I can do is I can do a calculation here, and I can say calc, right? And then I'm going to say 100, let's do 100 VH. Here, let's try this again. All right, 100 VH minus, and let's say 150 pixels, right? Let's try that. And now what's happening is that it fills the screen essentially, right? So we're not having that same problem, and it gives me a scroll bar whenever the whole thing's not showing, but as soon as the whole thing is showing, then that scroll bar disappears. And it does mean that it's going to constantly cover the entire screen, but I'm kind of okay with that because then you would just collapse that whenever you don't want it to be there. But that way, if for some reason somebody has a really, bizarre phone size, and or maybe it's not a bizarre size, it's just small, and we can't get everything to fit the way we want, then at least we'll have the ability to scroll that menu, all right, so that it doesn't disappear. And the only, really good way of making that not happen would be to do some really fancy JavaScript, or the other option would be to make this header static so that it scrolls with the rest of the page. But if you want all of this stuff to stay up here with the phone view, then you're going to need to leave it this way and then assign it this way. I think the book shows you how to flip it over so that it changes to static, and you're welcome to do it that way. But if you want to make sure that it's always there, even in a phone view, in a mobile view, small view, so that that's always there at the top, you can make it that way. Otherwise, you can always turn the whole header to static in your media query. Okay. Anyway, but that's what we would need to do. So if I toggle that again, we get this. I'll go to the inspector style sheet. We get this main navigation toggled. Nav menu, I can copy that whole thing, and then I can come over here and I can place it in the appropriate section. Let's go to styles, or style.css, and we're going to find the section that's for navigation. So if we look here, and 5.01 is navigation, 5.03 is actually where we deal with the menus, so let's find 5.03. In fact, if we do a find and we can do 5.03, we can jump straight to it, and there it is. All right, and so then down below here, I'm just going to go ahead and find this section, and we'll go ahead and paste that so that we know that whenever it's toggled, that it's going to do this. And let's do a save. We'll put this up there. Okay, and now we can do a refresh on this page, and we can see if it actually took our style, and yes it did, so that way we get that scroller if it's necessary, and we don't get it when it's not necessary. Okay.